Deja and Amy are college friends who live in the same city. Deja lives in an apartment downtown, while Amy lives in the suburbs. They've become interested in local politics, and they're excited to vote on election day. However, when Deja shows up at her polling location, she notices a very long line. After waiting in line for 3 hours, she finally gets to cast her vote and finds out that Amy was in and out of her polling location in 10 minutes. They don't understand why their voting experience was so different when they both live in the same city. Unfortunately, Deja and Amy were experiencing a small part of a much larger problem: voter suppression. Voter suppression is any effort to keep someone from voting with the intention of benefiting a specific person or political party. Here are 3 of the most common examples of voter suppression in the United States. First up, voter ID laws. The idea that every voter should show an ID sounds very reasonable. The problem is that voter ID laws create an additional barrier for anyone who isn't able to afford the cost of the new ID or can't take time off from work or school to go through the process, even if the ID is offered for free. Studies estimate that voter ID laws reduce turnout by 2 to 3 percentage points. To put this in perspective, 3 states in the 2016 presidential election were decided by less than 1% of the vote. Next up is polling place closures. Deja and Amy experienced vastly different voting times because there simply weren't enough polling locations in Deja's neighborhood. This is a common problem that mostly affects minority populations all over the US. In the spring of 2020 in Milwaukee, for example, the city reduced 180 polling stations down to 5. Milwaukee has the largest percentage of black residents in the state, and critics were quick to raise concerns about voter suppression. Texas has the highest number of polling closures in the country, and an analysis by The Guardian uncovered that neighborhoods where black and Latino populations are growing the fastest experience the majority of closures. Lastly, we have voter roll purges. There are plenty good reasons to remove outdated information from the voter records. However, the obvious problem becomes, who decides when to throw out the registered voter from the rolls? In 2018, the ACLU successfully sued the Kansas Secretary of State because the computer program he was using to remove duplicate voters was so flawed that for every legitimate duplicate found, it produced up to 200 false positives. The result was that voters would show up to vote only to find out that they couldn't because they'd been removed from the rolls. Proponents of these voter suppression efforts often say they are just trying to prevent voter fraud. However, study after study has concluded that the rate of potential voter fraud in the US is consistently too small to impact election results. So, what can you do? Voting is a constitutionally protected right, and every American should demand easy, fast, and accessible voting for everyone. Ideas like automatic voter registration when you turn 18, universal vote by mail options, early voting with plenty of polling locations, and same-day voter registration should be bipartisan ideas that we all support because we like living in a democracy. Democracy is like a tree. If we don't water it consistently with our participation, it will shrivel up and die. Let's continue to fight to keep our democracy alive and healthy. Peace.